Welcome to
Block.
Triple Blockheads,
Back set. Block down.
the podcast for all things volleyball.
Blockhead!
Aloha and welcome to another episode of Triple Blockheads. Marc, Frank, Makani in the house. And today, fellas, the Blockheads are going to be talking about blocking. So we're going to continue our skill progression, working through the last time we talked about attacking and how do we prevent those attacking. First line of defense is our blocking schemes. But let's go ahead and start further back into our development. Frank, how do you guys really focus on the training aspect in club within our blocking schemes?
Yeah, I think younger age groups, it's just helping them understand that we have to block. So the 12s and 11s, like getting them to just be at the net when the other team has the ball. And then as they get older, you still have some of the undersized players are still undersized. And, you know, we ask them to block and they're like, I'm not going to block anything though. And I'm just like, it's okay. It's just the principle of understanding that we need to be at the net because by the time you get older, we're going to be athletic enough and taller than we are at 12 and 13s to be able to still block. And we feel like half the time it's also like just a distraction to have someone there at the net blocking. So with the younger age groups, it's grasping the idea of blocking and that we have to be at the net when other people have the ball. And then as we get older, introducing, pressing, how to have independent hands when we block, try to take up more space, how to identify where hitters might want to be at, how to execute, blocking line, blocking angle versus a pin, or how to block a push one if they're a middle. So it gradually gets a little bit more specific, but I think that's the biggest thing that even watching tournaments like 11s and 12s, you just see teams not blocking and like, why not introduce it right away? So we just ran 11s and 12s tryouts, and I think I spent the whole tryout at the net just yelling, block, we got to block, and trying to find more creative ways to get them to understand this defensive part. So sometimes yelling block wasn't the right lingo. Block. But we added in some verbiage like protect us, or they're going to hit it, go block it, or just trying to be creative and helping them understand net play. So that's the biggest thing.
I love
Got to
that.
block.
Because they maybe can't get over the neck and actually conduct the technical portions in the air. A lot of blocking, successful blocking, regardless of what level it is how you can move to the place you need to block. So I think eye work, footwork are all things that you can focus on in the club space, even at that younger level.
Yeah, for sure. And then just getting kids to understand like schemes. So by the time they are entering college volleyball or high-level varsity volleyball, they understand the idea of how to take away certain angles that certain hitters like to hit.
I want to stay with the young, right? Those kids that maybe can't get over the net. I think blocking overall is probably one of the least trained skills. Rightful or not, like it doesn't, you don't physically gain many points from it throughout a game, but that doesn't give a true definition of its importance. And especially at that 10, 11, 12, when they're starting, the things you can do with them maybe don't even involve a net. You know what I mean? We're working on getting in front of a person that's working on an approach, right? And what moves do we be taking? But you can do that from off the net. That's stuff that we still work on if we want some just quick lineup stuff with our girls at the college level is they're going to approach to your right. How do we get in front of that approach path, and what footwork are we doing to get in that path? I think another fun thing to do is just flip the net upside down, like release the top of the net down. And now these 10, 11s can get their hands over the net, and we can get some volley lights and work on some actual block press stuff. They can jump, but don't let the physical or limitations prevent you from teaching important skills, right? Because to Frank's point, there will be a point where they can get over the net. There will be a point where they're going to need to know how to line up and block line or cross or execute a scheme. And if they don't have this background of how do I get in the way, right, from a simplicity standpoint, are they going to be behind when they get to that point. And that's kind of what we're seeing is like blocking is one of the things that by the time kids get to us, that's an area that they are usually behind in. And we train blocking every day in the gym. So keep finding ways for those young kids to get block reps, even if it isn't tangible block reps at the net. I think that's important.
I could not agree with you more. I think that is blocking is the number one skill as you get to the next level. Doesn't matter what level it is, Power 4 all the way down to JUCO, NEI, D1, D2, D3. It is the number one thing that you have to retrain or kind of recalibrate right now. And I think it is a detriment to these younger kids to not work on blocking the fundamentals of blocking, but maybe even more so the eye work. Getting in the way seems super simple. Right? Getting in the way of where that person is approaching and their arm is crossing is visualization. And I think it's hard for them to change how they're visualizing if their muscle movements are already ingrained, right? If they have muscle memory, they have to break the muscle memory to then start thinking about the visualization. At younger age, they're learning for the first time. If we can have our younger coaches out there really start visualizing and saying, hey, that arm is extending all the way from that person's body all the way across the net and to where that angle is. Just get in the way of the extended arm. That is by far the number one thing you can get so much more into their head so they can execute upon those skill sets later in life.
Yeah, that lineup piece to me is huge. That's the base of anything. And we try and talk about blocking in as simplified terms as humanly possible. It's like, what do you need to be a good blocker? Well, I need to be in the way, in their path, through the net on time. You know what I mean? Before they swing. Like between those three concepts, if we're executing all three of those, you may not touch balls still. You may not get any blocks, but you're doing what you need to do for us to be able to defend behind you and be that first line of defense.
Yeah, it's a big training piece for those who are working with younger kids is identifying what the success of a good block is. It's not always you getting a touch on the ball. That's kind of up to the hitter if they decide to go into you or not, But you can start the right pattern for us. You can filter them to the libero for us because of where you're, jumping on time at. I think that's good. Good segue for one of our future podcasts about film, but that's a good thing to watch visually is I was in this space and I started this rally in a positive way because they hit to the libero and not to my setter because I was executing, the scheme of the team.
I was blocking that right side cross or
Exactly.
yeah, trying to force down the line.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about how you measure success, both from a statistics perspective, but also just internally. How you see some success without actually touching the ball. But let's move from the littles to now some age groups that are getting over the net. How are you training? What specific cues are you looking in training for those older kids who are physically up there doing the technique?
Yeah, Marc touched on it, but eye work. So identifying the first thing is is there going to be an overpass that we have to go play right away? And then if there's not an overpass, is there going to be a dump? And if there's not a dump, who's getting set and what are they doing? Can we figure out what they're doing before they get set? So are we able to multitask our eyes a bit? And there's a lot of different sequences, a lot of different ways to get the kids to grasp that. But I think that's the biggest thing is not having our eyes on the ball the whole time and try to acquire information from other players before they get the ball.
Yeah, we talk a lot about widening your vision, right? Versus pinpoint on a ball to the setter to then back to the ball or hit or anything like that. I want to pick a spot kind of beyond the court where that just allows me in my periphery to see all those things. The ball's off the net, the middle's running a three. You know what I mean? It's really important, especially from that middle blocking position, to be able to absorb as much information as you can. And if you really try and lock in on one specific thing, you're going to miss a lot of secondary information that could get you a head start on where you're going. So we talk about widening that view, pick that spot far away, and then absorb everything else around without exact focus. Because I don't think you need exact focus until we get to the hand contact piece. You know what I mean? So while I'm in my base and I'm reading and sitting there, we want to kind of just let things come in information-wise that are going to educate our decision. And then by the time I'm into my block move and closing to the pin, now I'm focused on that hitter, and I can lock in eyes a little bit differently to the shoulder, to the ball contact, to the wrist, whatever it is that's going to allow me to eventually get in the way of that path.
I mean, I think that's a great analogy of just saying, hey, I want to consume all the information. Because I think, to your point, I think a lot of our younger athletes are just so worried about, the ball, first and foremost, right? But then where the ball is. And I think that's where you get caught out of position. You get caught, blocking especially, is anticipatory. If you're reacting to the ball, you're already late. And I think in that situation, I think they're consuming it all. You have to have some level of reaction, because sometimes you're gonna guess wrong, or you're gonna read wrong, and you just have to have that motor. But I think, consuming it all in is a great trait for that. Talk a little bit about hand placement. Talk a little about press. What are some of the cues that you guys like to bring to your athletes?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I see coming from high school to college transition, one is like their reset spacing at the net, right? Which is automatically, a lot of times when they reset, we're not resetting to our appropriate base. So I'm already at a disadvantage because I'm not in the right spot from that. And then from there, also the distance off the net that they're resetting to. See a lot of kids that'll reset really tight. Then when they go to make their move, they don't have room to press right away. And so you get a lot of reaching straight up and then swat over. Like that's probably the most common block move that I see from 13 to 18 is straight up and swat at that ball. So we pay a lot of attention about distance from the net. Our general rule is you want to, if your elbow's at your side, elbow to fingertip away, typically 1.5, 2 feet, but that allows your hands to stay in front of you the whole time. Cues that we talk about in that press piece, we want to be able to see the backs of our hands. If you need some feedback, some visual feedback, we'll draw smiley faces on hands. I've also done some arrows that come up through the crease of the hand. So when we go to press and rotate our hands up, that arrow should be pointing vertically versus out to a side or in. And that is kind of the hand shape. But then you also get the visual feedback going in that. Are my hands facing, and can I see them from in front of me? And I think both of those are important to that press piece. Overall, we're trying to make sure that call it a punch, but that actual physical punch move is me punching away from my body. I'm throwing everything away from my body to get my hands through that net or up over that net as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think for us, it's just helping our athletes grasp that idea that pressing is more important than reaching as high as you can, and limit how much we can be exposed by tooling and high swings off the block.
Yeah, I think over and wide is so much more important than just swatting at the ball. And it's for a young athlete, it's counterintuitive, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm going to go get the ball. Well, the ball was there. It's actually not there anymore. It's going into its path. Yeah. So really understanding, and again, that visualization of where is it going to be, and how can I press and be wide on where I want it, where I want to defend and take that away.
Yeah, we talk about that in terms of hands to the future, right? You're putting your hands in the future where this ball's going to be and not where they are right now, because that's what we see from a lot of independent hand movement stuff. That middle will be good in the seam with this hand, and now is reaching to the ball over here and gets beat inside. It's like, well, you went to where the ball was. Right. Can we get our hands to the future and see that path a little bit differently?
And as a prior libero and setter playing defense behind that is the hardest thing to do, is to defend someone who's swatting against the ball, because once they're there and then they're not, and you're like, what am I supposed to do?
100%.
And kind of going backwards, but I think we talked above the net, hand placement, pressing, vision work, eye work. Just bring the eye work back down to the ground and just footwork. What are some of there are a lot of ways to get from point A to point B in the blocking schemes, especially in the middle, but even on the outside with, the move to pinching and swing blocking. And, what are some of the philosophies that you guys like?
I like trying to compare it to attacking a ball and the rhythm of it. So trying to be slow to fast, especially if you're coming from kind of like a closed pinch read, a pinch read being your blockers are starting relatively close instead of starting super wide. So you have some approach space that you might have to get out to if you're blocking the pin, but trying to keep a that rhythm somewhat the same, where while you're reading, you're not going too fast where you fly by a hitter and you end up overdoing your scheme a bit. So I think that's kind of the big thing for us, especially when we teach pinch blocking. I think a lot of our athletes feel so far away from where the hitter's going to jump from.
Yep.
So just repping out the rhythm of being slow to fast and not feeling like you have to be in a rush right away, and you might have some sort of middle blocking responsibility to help out with first, and let's see if they're in system first is the middle an option, and if not, then we can go make our first crossover move or your first right step or left step move, depending on what your coach is teaching you footwork wise. But I think that's the big thing with our kids when we start doing a pinch introduction is don't just fly out there right away.
I think that's a huge component to it is they see that distance. And they're like, well, how can I possibly cover this ground? I think that's a good opportunity to move them away from the net and just go sideline to sideline and be like, all right, how few of this footwork pattern can you take to get across the court? And once they realize when they're trying to really maximize that distance of that move, they'll realize that it's really not as far as you think. And the other component to that we see a lot is people think going fast is like a fast foot turnover. But what that turns into is typically small steps and then broad jump out or fly out past that hitter or not get a good lineup. It's hard to defend behind those types of blockers anyway. So we like to talk about speed is power, right? If I'm making powerful moves and I'm pushing off hard in all of my steps, I'm going to go fast, right? So kind of redefining what that means as for your blockers is what is fast? Fast is power. Like I'm pushing to everything I do. We're not worried about foot turnover as much as we are, can I make a powerful move? Can I be athletic? Am I in a position that's going to allow me to be an athlete?
I mean, I think your footwork has a lot to do with your blocking scheme and your blocking system. And I think a lot of that is also what you're getting a little bit more into in a high-level club, especially in collegiate level, is what are your responsibilities, what's your primary, what's your secondary responsibility, and then kind of what do we want to take away, right? So talk a little bit about, how your base, where you start, and then where your footwork ends up being, ties into what you want to do to be successful as a collective blocking team.
I think first you got to be able to have a plethora of footwork pattern moves. You know what I mean? If you're traditionally a swing blocking team and you're going to be pinched, you got to have your crossover normal, but you also have to be able to like get into a crossover step, realize you're too wide, and then shuffle, like hit a hop back inside. Yeah. So I think irregular footwork patterns are important to incorporate into your training so that you don't feel like I'm locked in and I've started my swing block move and that ball's inside, but this is all I know how to do. So now I'm going up and we're going to let this kid bounce it at 10 feet. Or I'm going to get up and then really try and reach and then have a super weak or exposed block. So I think working on a shuffle, a push slant, 1 foot takeoff, a crossover swing, a 3-step crossover swing, but gaining all of those footwork patterns that could come up in a game so they feel comfortable jumping from a strong position, because that's typically what you'll see. When we get a bad lineup, I'm a little off balance, and now my jump is tiny, and I'm not in a good lineup, and I'm not very high or through the net. It's going to be really hard to get a good block on that because my vision was bad, my first step, whatever it was, you know what I mean? So can I be strong when I go to take off? I think that's a really important thing. So you got to be able to flex some of those footwork situations. From a block base perspective, I think that's relative to schools of thought, right? It's either relative to the athletes you have or what you're going to see coming at you,
right?
Like what your opponent's going to do. And our block bases adjust mostly dependent on tempo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if the opponent side is running a really fast go, so fast that I don't think our right front blocker can sit at the 31 base where we would love to have them, where they're right in front of where that 31 would run and get out, we're going to have to base adjust them wide. And then they're probably going a little bit more static of a move or maybe just a step close because it's so fast. And that would allow our middle to take a little bit more chance and really dive into that hole a little bit differently. And we're probably talking that week in scout that, hey, this is an X2 type of game. X2 is our 1 foot takeoff move. And that's going to be our primary move this week. So we're going to work on that move in system exclusively. You know what I mean? So there's, for us at our level, there's a lot of base adjustments, but most of it is done from opponents coming in. If I'm a younger athlete or I'm coaching a younger team, I'm probably going to build based on our strengths. It'd be one, you don't have the resources or information to scout every team and know this is how we need to base adjust before the match starts or while you're training the week before. Maybe in high school you'd have a little bit more flexibility, but from a club perspective, I don't think that's very realistic. So I'm probably going to build based on what I have and how to maximize the strengths of my team. So what does that look like in different systems for you guys, Frank?
I think young kids, you want to be responsible as a club so that they can grasp a lot of that when they're older. So when they're young, I think you're just trying to grasp the idea of we're going to double block the middle and introduce that blocking strategy. And then as they get older, we can start talking about we're going to try to block line on the outside where that actually might matter more in the outcome of a match or something. I think at 12s, it doesn't really matter how you're blocking somebody. You gotta be able to serve a
block
pass.
ball.
Yeah. But let's maybe try to have the outside block the middle. That's a great learning tool for that outside to help them to realize that you're responsible for more than just blocking only your hitter.
Yeah, I think what I've seen a lot of is clubs in high schools are really gravitating to kind of that pinch base and kind of helping the middle, which is great. I think where what's lost is the conversation and the IQ, the eye work, the consuming all the information, that your base is fluid based on every moment in time that ball is still in that rally, right? Who's passing the ball? What can they run out of that pass? Where that pass is located, height and tempo. Where is that setter located? Is she, set, or is she coming from the back row, front row, coming from 3 or 4? Where your help is going.
Yep.
If I'm a right side and they're running a slide, why am I pinched? Right? Maybe they have a strong pipe and a banger in the back row, potentially, right? But if your secondary is really going to be your slide, then why am I pinched and late to the pin? And I see that a lot as we get to that next level, is that we're late because we're pinched. But when we are asking, what are you seeing? It's, I'm seeing the fact that it was a good pass and I need to help. Well, where is the middle going?
Yeah.
Right?
Or is the middle even an option? I think that's something that we see. Or like what hitters are actually available to you. You know what I mean? If our outsides tip that short seam and off block is the one that picks it up, is that off block going to get set? Probably not. So how are we base adjusting and seeing the right things? I think part of that is some situational IQ stuff that just comes through reps, but I think it's important for coaches to stop that play after it happens and bring to light, all right, what are the things that we didn't see, or what information is out there, and let them kind of problem solve through and figure out, all right, well, it's more than just they dug it, the ball's up, and I'm resetting to base. When I'm getting to base, what am I seeing? Who can hit? Are they off the net, right? Is it out of system? All of that leads to trying to stay ahead of the play, which as a blocker, I think that's your goal as much as you can. Now, perfect in system, middles are going to struggle to be ahead of the play. That's going to be a reactive move, unless there's some pretty giving tells from a setter. But overall, it's if that ball's at 15 feet off the net, where are they going to go, or where do they usually go? And let's be really good in that phase all the time. For a younger team or a high school team, 50-60% of the game is out of system. We should be closed every time that it's out of system. You know what I mean? There's no excuse for seeing setter digs immediately. Which way are they facing? Which way are they going to go? And if you dedicate or move to that position and are wrong, you have the longest amount of time you ever will to recover back and still get a double up on that side. So I think that piece is huge for younger teams. I mean, us too. Like, let's not pretend like if it's out of system, we're expecting to get a touch or a block every single time, because there's no excuse for us being poorly lined up or not closed in that phase.
I mean, it seems so simple, but it's process of elimination and weighing your probabilities, right? I mean,
I mean, that doesn't sound simple.
Well, I'm just saying, right?
Probability.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, but as you look at what's across the net, are you going to block the 5-5 outside or the 6-2 right side?
Right.
Again, probability is complex, but take it in simpler format, right?
Yeah.
Who's better? Who do you want to stop?
Yeah, I think game management wise, it's so important that as a coach, you have someone talking to the blockers about, here in this rotation, we're looking for this. We're prioritizing this. If you're going to let someone have a one-on-one, you got to make sure you communicate that so the middle isn't, over prioritizing too many people, and we can actually try and get a stop on someone that we think probability wise might get the ball. And I think by the time our kids are 17, 18, we want to have a pretty good idea of prioritizing the right people. You might not figure that out in club. You might not figure that out until the second set. But let's not just get beat by the same thing over and over without trying something.
Yeah,
especially at the net.
We always try and ID the kid. Who's the kid on their team? And it's usually a pin. It can be a right side at times. But knowing that kid is going to get most of the out-of-system stuff. That kid is going to get most of the in-system stuff if they're that dominant middle. You know what I mean? And that information, if they forget everything else but they remember where the kid is, then we're going to do a pretty good job blocking. You know what I mean?
There's probably two things I enjoy the most about coaching, and that's out-of-timeout plays and blocking schemes. And just that's the problem solving of it, right? So that's where you get to coach really and try to solve a problem.
Yeah. And you can probably tell who that kid is just by watching the first 60 seconds of warm-up. I mean, especially in club, right? Especially in club, there's the one kid that's just going to stand out, who either flies or bangs or is so big in the middle that you're like, I can't stop that. We're going to go ahead and try to make sure that we focus over there.
Yeah.
But as you talk about, just taking it all in, taking and resetting bases, the role that is the most important in that to set the whole entire defensive scheme is the middle. So talk a little bit about middle vision, IQ in the middle, and specific middle tactics that you like.
Yeah. Vision wise, it's that expanded view. That's what we're trying to do. I feel like there's basically two basic block schemes for your middles right away. We're either going to read and be completely stationary in the middle, regardless of where our opposing middle runs around us, and then fronting, right? So I'm going to get in front of wherever that middle is from an in-system perspective. So if they run to the 31, I'm going to get in front of the 31. I think both have their advantages. We do a combination of both. It's definitely situational, but I prefer to be a traditional read blocking team. Even in that read blocking scheme, I think there's some middles that are quick enough that can do kind of a baby front, like maybe one step towards that kid and still recover both ways. But if you have a kid that maybe is a little bit slower reactions, you may have to just true read because they can't take that step, get balanced, and still react in time.
Like a shade.
Not quite a front, but we're going to shade a step.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I think all of those are really important.
The middle has to understand our blocking system and what we want to do probably the most, because they're the ones who creating that secondary block to take more space away at the net, funneling the defense, etc. Talk a little bit about some simple things in club, that because you're not going to really scout as much, but out of system, or hey, there's a front row setter. What are some of the key things that every team you can call out in the moment?
Yeah, I want to probably at first empower the middles more to be the people at the net when we're serving, to make sure the pins are on the same page about where we're going to block at, and letting them have just empowering them to be almost like that middle linebacker type of personality in terms of executing what we're trying to do from what the coach is telling them. And I think that then empowers them to try and do all the things that we've kind of talked about, like trying to grasp the whole rotation, who's the priority, and where I should prioritize myself at in that read. I think most of the middles that come in at young ages, they are all fronting or following the other middle. Wherever they're going with them.
Yeah.
So they get burned a lot, if the other middle is running a 3, we'll get burned a lot on the right side or something. So
Or they're just following the ball.
or they're following the ball too. Yeah, or they're following the setter.
The setter.
Yeah. They're following something and they're doing that every time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the next big thing is teaching them how to be neutral, and then teaching them that there are going to be times you do want to follow the middle, but why would we follow the middle, and helping them understand when that would make sense versus being more neutral, or versus just piecing out and just going to the outside right away and not even worrying about the middle of the right side. So just teaching them different. I think they all come in thinking that they have to close every block. I think our back row players think that too, right? I think that's a lot of the early feedback I see girls giving each other is, we got to close the block. It's like, well, they were super in system, so we're going to probably be late to the pin, and helping them understand that higher level volleyball means that sometimes there's going to be open gaps, and sometimes there's going to be open gaps on purpose because we want to give a certain player a bunch of space, and we want to make sure we double block someone else. So it's all those things with young middles, seeing which habit they currently have, and empowering them to be the ones that talk to the pins about what we're going to try and do for that rotation or for that play.
What does your block communication look like right now?
Every coach is a little bit different. I don't think it's in terms of talking schemes, like our scheme language.
So if your middle is empowered and so we got to take this kid line, how are they communicating to their pin hitters, like, this is what we're going to do in this play?
I think they're just telling, hey, we got block line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think for our older teams, where like we call it 21 right or 21 left, which means the middle is going to essentially 21 being double blocked to the right, double to the left. Mm-hmm. So that's simple verbiage that we've used to introduce. And then after that, we're sometimes still following up with the pins before the play and just saying, hey, you still have to help with the gap, and then go outside or whatever, communicating the help responsibilities to the pin.
Mm. We have the audio piece, right? You got to talk and make sure everybody sees what we're trying to do, but we also have a series of hand signals behind so that the defense knows also. Mm-hmm. We require the defense to confirm the block signs that they see each play, just to make sure everybody is on the same page, because what we're doing from a block perspective is going to change how we're defending certain attacks.
Yep.
So everybody's got to be, all 6 need to be on the same page with what we're trying to execute in this one time.
Yeah,
so.
My squad does the same thing. So very beach-like, 1-2s.
1s and 2s.
And then if we 21, the middle is showing which side they're going to cheat to.
Yep.
Good stuff. You guys do the same thing, 1s and 2s, or you guys complex?
1s and 2s for our pins. The middle will have a sequence of what they're going to do. So if we're going to read or front, we call it just a shade. Then they'll have a different hand signal for that. And then if there's a special, we're releasing right, or we're going to solo the slide, like any of those types of things will have their own hand signals, just to make sure everybody knows. Same thing if we're going to commit on a middle or commit out to a pin, like those have their own hand signals.
Yeah.
But from a confirmation piece, like the audio feedback of a DS being like, what's your call? You know what I mean? That's really important, just to keep everybody on the same page and accountable to what we're trying to execute.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
You mean you don't want your libero to think they're blocking angle and just be sitting or blocking line, and you're sitting on the line, and all of a sudden they're dropping into the angle and you get blown up? That's not a good thing?
Well, I mean, preferably not, but depends on how good your bro is, I guess.
These creative block schemes, like, hey, we're gonna commit to soloing the slide and we're going to defend around it, or we're going to commit to, we have to take away their middle way, so we're gonna leave their right side, or we're gonna go one-on-one on the pipe. Things like that. These are things that coaches can impact the game, right? Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, right? Sometimes the other team adjusts, whatever it might be. Then we have to adjust. Mm-hmm. But what are other things, as a coach out there, that we can do to help our blockers be successful, whether it be schemes, whether it be the one thing I like, I'll just throw it out there to start it off. I like serving as a benefit to enhance our blocking success, right? Who I'm serving, how I'm serving. If I know that outside doesn't like to come inside, I'm going to serve them short, and I'm going to continue to serve them short, because that might get them out of rhythm, allows us to have a little more success identifying less options on the other side. So that's just one of those.
It's like men's volleyball to a T, right? Like, everyone's serving super hard because you want to eliminate one of the hitters. So now it's 3 hitters versus 3 blockers, and it's not like a volleyball fast break every time that they have the ball, you know. So I love that idea for women's volleyball too, and in its own way. I don't know if you're going to have 6 top spin servers, but you can still have that same mindset.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the depth change to eliminate hitters is a real thing, right? And I think if you have a different person calling serves from who's calling your block schemes, depending on your staff totals, you need to, like, if you're going to do something like that, like, hey, I'm taking out the outside, we're serving short zone 4 here, like that, whoever's calling that scheme needs to know that that's going to happen, because that's going to change the feedback that they're giving. And that sometimes I don't think coaches just get in their zone of handling their stuff and don't necessarily be like, hey, about to serve short.
Yeah.
Like, just so you know.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's important for sure.
100%.
I mean, it's the first offensive touch to the first defensive touch, right? It's there's an immediate cause and effect.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, from if you serve aggressively, blocker's job gets way easier.
There's probability to what's going to happen.
As far as like an initial scheme, I think to me the most important thing, if you don't already have like a out of system release move or how you want to prep your out of system to be closed every time, that's the first thing I would do. I wouldn't, like, in system's hard, we'll figure it out as we go. We can be good out of system every time. This is, and if we're just sitting in the middle of the court, we're not using the information that we have to put us in a better situation. So that would be the very, very first thing I do is we're going to work on our dedicated out of system moves. And sometimes through a scout, we'll be like, all right, we're dedicating right no matter what, because they just chuck it out there every time. Or this setter, when she gets to 15 feet, she's more of a jack setter, which means she's going to set the further set. So we just know that going into it. And we can, if we start to see that and she starts to tell, now we can start releasing that opposite direction. Or maybe she's more of a Jill setter, which means she's going to make the easier set as she's going. But those are important things to ID right away with your opposing setters. What do they typically do when they get to that mid to out of system range? Same thing with liberos, like where do they typically like to set? And then we will dedicate one way or the other, and that might change rotation to rotation. Maybe they split in row 1 and their bomb hitter is on the right for this row, and then they always kick it to her out of system. Well, we don't want to dedicate to the pin, to the outside, because the kid is over there on the right. So there's some situational IQ stuff and definitely reminders that have to happen, but I think that's the initial primary.
What do you guys think is the next thing in blocking? I mean, we know that playing out of system or playing tight out of system is like a more and more popular thing. Is the next thing pulling your hands away?
I think that's the thing that we're seeing, or at least trying to work on more, is people are getting so good at that jam or the two-hand push off. Is if you feel like I can't absolutely surround the outside of this ball and there's no way they can tool me, I might pull hands. And again, that's probably more of an individual basis. Some kids can make that distinguishment in the air and some can't. So definitely something to work on. But I think that's the next piece, right? Because we're teaching, right? Whatever you're teaching your hitters to do offensively, you need to be teaching your blockers to defend whatever that thing is.
I mean, this is simple, but and we've seen this improve in the women's game more in the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's just triple blocking, even in an in-system situation. I mean, you see that in the men's game like constantly, just out of necessity. Right.
You got to touch that ball.
You have to touch that ball.
Yeah.
But in the women's game, I think we're seeing that much more often than we had in the past.
Yeah, we call that a max, right? If we're in a triple block, and there's definite situations that would call for it or not. Like if a kid is just able to hit that sharp cross ball to the tee and we're not digging it, well, we better put a third blocker in front of it and try and touch or block that ball. Just take away that option for her. The other one is just if they set out of system really far inside, we might go triple block just to make sure we're surrounding that hitter completely and not giving her an extra angle to the corner or anything like that.
And I think we talk a lot in this episode around just all these movements. We haven't really talked a lot about blocking, terminating the ball with that block, because a lot of the work is non-ball related, or all of the work is non-ball related. And it kind of leads me into kind of the last kind of segment I want to talk about is around how do you define success as a blocker? And, let's start middles especially, because you are involved in the block in some way, almost in every single play, offensive play against you. So how are we coaching our team to identify those small wins, even though they're not actually touching the ball, but also, and I want to lead this into kind of more of a parent discussion as well. But let's start just from a coaching and team perspective.
I think it's defining what the goal of each situation is important. So, like, what's our block goal in system, right? If the opponent's in system and they have all their options, what's our goal as blockers, right? We're going to try and take away the middle of the floor. No one gets to bounce a clean kill into the middle where we can't defend. So if that means I'm forcing a kid down the line to the libero and then they hit down the line to the libero, I did what I'm supposed to do. I didn't touch that ball, but I forced her into something we can defend versus something we can't. And I think that's an important conversation you need to have with your team. That goal probably changes out of system where we're trying to stuff or line up and get a touch every single time. If we're scheming one way or another, if I'm going to commit on a middle, I expect us to touch that middle. You know what I mean? Dive into that space and really get a touch. You may not get a block, but we're going to get a touch for sure if we're going to commit on a kid. So I think just having those conversations and realizing that because you didn't touch it doesn't make it a bad block. If we're funneling the right way and doing what we need to do. So we would talk more about exterior stuff. So if they go around you to the outside, probably good, unless we are trying to block line. Then not as good. But I would much rather that feedback than them beating us in the seam every time. Seam is hard to defend. Odds it's going to hit one of the arms that are around there and be really hard to defend. So if I'm going to put an emphasis somewhere, I'm going to say let's be better in the seam and give them some space to the outside, just less court to physically swing into. And typically you have a defender there.
He stole all my stuff. So no, honestly, if that girl gets subbed out, you did your job as a blocker in a defensive group. You did a great job.
That is the ultimate compliment.
That is the ultimate end game. Get her subbed out. Get the girl who scores the most points subbed out of the match. Yeah. From what you do in the service line, from what you're doing scheme wise, from how you get that girl to respond after getting blocked. We see a lot of hitters in club get blocked and then they roll shot after. So are you guys able to, as a defensive group, connect after a block and identify what's going to probably happen next and run that girl or guy out of options of what to do offensively and leave them in a place where they're not sure how to score?
I think from a parent perspective, I think when you see your kid blocking and you see, I just want to bring to light the fact that good defensive teams, a lot of times, especially in club, like, oh, we have a really good libero and she digs a lot of balls, or middle back, whatever it might be. If they're getting those balls to dig, is probably because there's some level of good blocking or at least reading and funneling happening. Might be perfect, but everyone's working as a team defensively. If you're a parent out there and you're seeing and you are watching your kid and they just have a huge motor and they're going side to side and they're identifying, they're always, feel like they're balanced and they're max jumping. There's a reason why a stuff block or a block for a point is the most energized play in volleyball. It's because it's hard to do.
Yep.
So, for those fans out there, for your teammates that are out there, when someone does that, celebrate the heck out of it. It is an accomplishment. But equally as much is if someone's getting a dig, that's equally as that front line blocking is forcing that way. And especially as a prior libero, my middle going back and forth and having that motor and continuing to blocking every single time, we appreciate that. So liberos out there, make sure you're telling your blockers that too.
I think to piggyback on that is from a block touch perspective, right? If you want to talk about the percentage of balls that you touch, like good blockers touch around 50% of balls, right, that they have an opportunity to. Okay, of that, maybe 10% of them are stuffed. You know what I mean? So if you're living and dying by, am I stuffing this ball? You're not going to get the fulfillment that you're looking for or think you're being as successful as you actually are. To us, if you get a block touch and pop it up in the air, that's a free ball. And we're going to convert that 70% of the time for a kill. That is the most important thing. That's better than blocking a ball that gets covered back on that other side because we get to attack from an easy perspective now. So I think that becomes the most important thing is like, can I touch the ball in a positive way? And then we start talking about if I'm late, what are my hands doing that are going to allow this ball to kick up versus kick off out of bounds in a different way. So we talk a lot about hand angle stuff, especially in our X2 and recovery moves. Can I flatten out my hands and give them something to hit off of that will kick up in the air that we can then transition out of? But that's a huge piece is the motor paired with touches are as good as gold. You know what I mean? Positive touches are gold for us.
Mm-hmm. From start to finish in this episode, we talked a lot about eye work. We're talking about motor. We talk about just overall consumption of all the information, being fluid in your bases, and then also just coaching how you can impact the game just by scheme, and continuing to talk to your team about what's happening. I think every skill set needs some eye work. Every skill set needs that IQ, but the blocking part of it, because it's less ball contact, I think you just have to really focus in on that as you continue to train. These were appropriately named triple blockheads. Lots of blocking passion here. All Frank wants to do is call blocking assignments.
Yeah. I also want to say something to the high school statisticians that a block touch is not a block. We have some crazy numbers in the state of Iowa. We probably lead all blockers in the nation.
And a free ball is not a dig?
Free ball's not a dig either. Separate episode.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, triple blockheads out.
Blockheads.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Triple Blockheads. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode.